I was just coming down a mountain, and I was thinking about Paradox. I was thinking about all the stuff that gets stuck on Paradox, and how it's sticky and kind of slippery, kind of like a spider web can be, and it slides around on it, it gets really stuck. And then, but the web's not real. The web is just a catch. It's just a net. And, oh gosh, I'm so integrating. I can see Bruce Lipton coming in and Alan Watts and my meditation and this thing that I was just thinking about clearing Paradox. And I had this really great line that got stuck in my head, and I thought I should stop and do a video. And, let's see if I can remember. Or let it come back to me. It was almost like a spoken word piece that was beginning. I stored Paradox in my inner thighs. That was the line. I stored Paradox in my inner thighs. I have this section of this body that I have sat in meditation about. I've never talked about this before to anybody. I have sat in meditation about the really kind of globulal fat on my inner thighs for an absurd amount of time. I used to beat myself up for them, and I used to do everything I could possibly figure out how to do, exercise and stretching wise, and everything else I could figure out how to make my upper inner thighs look presentable. I wasn't even going for like no gap. That wasn't even a thing in my thing. It was just I wanted the skin to be smooth. I have all this cellulite. And then I found out that cellulite has to do with nothing to do with anything I thought I was doing wrong. Clearly I was doing something wrong, but it's a connective tissue issue, and which explains a lot of, my hyper extendability, and, my arms go backwards and stuff. So do my knees. And it's better now that I'm not mineral deficient, but it's something that I've been struggling with and something I've never talked about. So anyway, so I was thinking about how I store Paradox in my inner thighs. And I've been really wondering and sitting with if I can clear all of my... This is actually the game that I'm playing. It's ridiculous. I didn't even know I was doing this. I am playing the game of, let's clear my programming and see if the programming is doing anything to my inner thighs, I swear. Because it's a mystery to me, why my body kind of developed the way that it did. And early traumas definitely had something to do with it. Maybe not something... I had many, 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 many unsettling things that happened in my childhood that I didn't have language for, so I didn't get support around. Parents getting divorced, moving many times. I was in 13 different schools by the time I graduated high school. Or did I live in 13 different places? I think I was in 13 different schools, and that included, there was a couple of, normal shifts where I went with my own grade, but I was in 13 different schools by the time I graduated, and I don't remember why I was saying that. I was talking about my inner thighs, and I'm letting myself get distracted because it's really uncomfortable to talk about it. I know I'm not alone. That's why I'm making this video. I know all of us have a part that we've forgotten that we don't think about, But anyway, in order to go from my own worst enemy to my own best friend, I needed to have a new relationship with my inner thighs. So rather than letting myself fall in love with them, because that was hard, I became their advocate. So it was something went wrong, which is why you ended up this way. Let's see if we can fix it. So, that's kind of like the mom in the video, the slam poet, Katie, something that starts with an M, and the video is called Pretty, and she's talking about her mom, who's holding her head like a cabbage, and talking about, getting all these things fixed because something went wrong. And so, okay, so instead of being my own worst enemy, I became my own mom, which is an improvement, especially if your mom is kind, and my programming around moms are that they are kind. And I don't know how to be my own best friend about my inner thighs yet. So, and maybe that's what it's waiting for. So I've been kind of going the back way around, because like the fastest way through a problem is through. The fastest way to get through whatever you're going through is go through it. But if you get blocked, rather than spending a lot of time coming up against the barrier, you could just take a detour and you could go the other way. So instead of trying to become my own best friend about my inner thighs, which I didn't have a template for, I don't know anybody who loves their inner thighs. I know people who spend a lot of time like working on them and are now pleased with the success of their work, but that they have upkeep to do. That's not a good relationship with your thighs either. Please tell me what this looks like if you have a good relationship with your inner thighs. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people who like really are into them, and that it's not okay socially to say that you're into your like particular body parts. So that's why we don't have models for what that looks like. So ladies and men, if you are very much like loving your upper inner thighs, please take photographs of them and share them and talk about how you like this body part, so that those of us who don't have something to model, because there isn't a model in our society for somebody liking them. Except for maybe like Jane Fonda, but I don't like see her as really actually having a good body image, and I might be wrong. So that just might be her characters that are like that. I keep letting myself get distracted because this is really hard to talk about. So I think I saw paradox in my inner thighs. I think when I was a baby that there was like, you know, when you're laying in your crib and you're crying and you want somebody to come for you, like, what is that? You know, I mean, you don't have a sense of like what the rest of the world is like yet. You don't have a mental picture. So where are you summoning them from? And like, what do you have to believe about you when they don't come? You know, and how far away do you want that memory to go? And what if we really do store memories in fat? I think we do, because it matches my experience that memories are stored in fat, particularly painful ones. Because anybody who's lost a lot of weight knows that there's a lot that goes through there. Like, they have a lot of stuff they have to process or they go crazy. So it makes sense. I mean, it just does. It makes sense when the body is cannibalizing itself, that whatever was stored in there gets released. And I mean, we think we store our memories in our brain, but we really don't have that mapped out. I think it's possible that we have experiences stored in, particularly like really deep, like tissue, like deep experiences. I think there's only so much. I don't think experiences can get stored up here, because this isn't where the experience happened. I think where the experience happened is in the body. And if you want to get it as far away from anything vital for your survival as you can, you would put it in the upper inner thigh, because it doesn't interfere with the reproductive system. It's actually kind of more comfortable, actually, because you don't have bone on bone. It definitely makes sex more comfortable, having some fat there. So, you know, and it's kind of like separated from the womb, so it's not really like as close to it, but maybe it is. Maybe the traumas do get shared with the children, and maybe that's exactly how we pass down trauma from generation to generation, because we store it in our upper inner thighs. I'm making this up, but it feels true, you know? And so science, please go try and figure out how to prove me wrong, because you'll have to invent an entire field of science that I want to work in order to do it. So I think we store trauma in our upper inner thighs. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're so focused on them, is because this is the trauma that we need to heal. So an interesting way to test my theory is to clear all of our traumas and then see what happens to our thighs. So that's kind of what I'm doing, because I didn't know how to become my own best friend. Like, it's much easier to be best friends with somebody you find acceptable than to figure out how to become best friends with somebody you once considered an enemy, you know? I mean, I've heard stories of guys that did that and they went and beat each other up and then they were friends. But, like, I don't really understand how that mechanism works. That's not one of mine. So, anyway, but I recognized that in order for me to get well, that I had to be able to flood every bit of me with love. And that includes my thighs. So I do a lot of, anyway, a long rambling video of me being super exposed. I don't want to say embarrassed because it doesn't feel like that. Embarrassment feels like a closing off, a shutting down. Being exposed and being okay with it feels very, 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 very naked. And I'm having a lot of trouble looking at the camera, but I'm willing to be filmed. But yeah, I think we store trauma in our upper inner thighs. And I was just thinking about clearing paradox and like finding all these webs that have all this stuff caught in it and letting what needs to fall through just fall through. Programming that we don't need anymore, can just go. Because we're not innocent babies in a crib anymore. We're just not, If we have needs, we have words. We have words and we have social media. I think the babies that are in cribs probably also have their own tablets and can probably email mommy and daddy if they needed help now. So, like, the trauma that I had as an infant may not even be a trauma anybody ever has to have again. When you had a question as a teenager, when you were my age, you had to find a person to ask for things that you couldn't look up in a book. Like, what does blowjob mean? Like, when people around you are talking about that and you don't know what it means, you have to ask a person. I never developed the social skills that I needed to do until I was, like, much older to be able to ask the question. Kids now don't ever have that trauma. That's not a trauma a kid now would have. They would ask Google. Each generation clears paradoxes, kinda, so that the next generation doesn't have to have that trauma. Except we keep the programming for it because we don't have anybody working in that realm that knows that there are plenty of people working in that realm, but that's not what they're trained to do, really. I actually just heard of a group that is what they're training to do, and that's exciting. But we really aren't trained to work directly on the programming because you need nutritional support, and you need lifestyle support, and you need to have all of your other needs met in order to work on the programming. So I've been told that there are people that feel like I have, that not a lot of people have the luxury to do the kind of work that I'm doing on myself. But I think it's kind of like that's saying to somebody who has like a union job that like it's not okay for them to be making enough money to live on because other people aren't. It kind of resonates similarly to me. Is like I let go of a good paying job when I was selling cars because it was killing me. I literally had a 6 centimeter tumor on my liver. We don't know what it was. It could have been fat. It could have been trauma. I mean, maybe that's one of the things. Maybe trauma gets stored in fat on your liver, too. Because that's where it comes from, I think. I think trauma has to go through the liver or kidneys. That feels right. Because maybe it's in the blood. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Science, please figure it out. Or give me a lab and give me some brilliant people and I'll work on it because that sounds really interesting. I start paradox in my inner thoughts. What would it look like if we could all clear our programming that didn't work for us? The programming that didn't match the world we wanted to live in. We keep having worlds we don't want to be living in because we have programming that was designed for those worlds. And when you have... It's sort of like... Well, I mean, you can use computer analogies, right? If you upgrade the software, which is kind of like what we pick up from society, and the hardware doesn't get upgraded or something. I don't know. But anyway. Did I say everything that needed to be said? Probably, but not in the right order. Put that on my tombstone. But don't bury me. And don't give me a tombstone. I don't want one. Do whatever you want. I don't care. But, that was fun.